Okay, well, once again, Prof Myers has dabbed his toe back into the murky waters of dictionary atheism, which I think is something that he coined himself as a little bit of a put down for people whose atheism largely consists of not believing in God and doesn't consist of the kind of social justice issues that he's interested in as well, and which he tacks on as baggage and sees as fundamental to what actually being an atheist is, or so it would seem. Now that's what I want to talk about in this video, and this is a video that you've got a guy called Slow17 Motion, a subscriber of mine, to either thank for or blame as you see fit, because he drew my attention to this. So let me just, before I go on to the meat, put some flesh on the bones of this, just a little comment on, because really this blog article was about two things. It was about the usage of the word free thought and people's misuse or misunderstanding of it, and then looking at atheism and dictionary atheism and going back to that. Let's just deal with the free thought thing first. The title of this blog entry is this: please, please people, stop using the naive dictionary meaning of words in place of context. And you know, with regard to free thought, he brings up the example of Pat Condell, who called it ludicrously named free thought blogs because he's saying there's not a lot of free thinking there. Pat Condell is technically wrong there. I accept that. When I first came across free thought blogs, I made the same mistake again. I made this example of taking the name literally as to mean thinking freely. That isn't what it means. So I didn't put it in context. I didn't look at the word as a whole. I just kind of tried to make up my own definition from the different parts of the world and misapplied it and assumed that the definition that I gave had to apply to what they were doing. So I was an idiot there. I'll hold my hand up there. Prof Myers has me on this one. But the interesting thing is, he needs to start putting his money where his mouth is, because when it comes to skeptics organisations, he does the same fucking thing himself. He looks at the word skeptic and says, well, what skepticism is, it's not about certain issues, it's about a way of looking at things. And so you can address any subject from a skeptical standpoint. Therefore, skeptics organisations can be about anything as long as it's looking from that standpoint. Of course, that is not a leap that you can make. Organisations and movements can define for themselves what their organisation and movement is about, and taking a naive dictionary definition of the word skeptic and assuming that applies to any specific skeptic organisation or movement is wrong. Whether it's about Prof Myers' desire to see religion being discussed in organisations that have always been quite adamant that that is not something they wish to discuss, or whether it could be social justice issues like some of these feminist issues and issues of equality that they haven't traditionally discussed. It's not for them to mandate what these organisations discuss on the basis of definitions, naive dictionary definitions of terms, any more than it is for me to critique the validity of calling something free thought blogs when the thought at times appears anything other than free. That's just a little intro here. I'd like you to read, if you can be asked, the blog that Prof Myers has done here. He then goes on to talk about dictionary atheism. If you can't be bothered to read all the comments, that's quite understandable. There are some very illuminating comments, and there are quite a number of people that are disagreeing with Prof Myers on this, albeit some of them get banned or told to fuck off by him in fairly short order. But there are some people disagreeing with him. But at least read Prof Myers' comments. His are the ones that are in red, so they're really, really easy to pick out. One comment that wasn't by Prof Myers that I will read out to you is by Wowbagger, and this is on the subject of dictionary atheism. As a general rule, resorting to the dictionary argument is the act of someone seeking to protect the status quo, as we've seen with things like rape, harassment, bullying and misogyny. The more they can get us to waste time on debating abstract concepts, the less likely it is that they'll have to change their attitudes, behaviours. It's dishonest bullshit, and it needs to be called out as such. So using dictionary definitions for terms is dishonest bullshit. Wowbagger doesn't like people resorting to the dictionary argument, but I need to ask Wowbagger, because I'm having a really tough time parsing this post, Is this a dictionary argument or a non-dictionary argument? And are we talking about a dictionary or a non-dictionary dictionary? And this dishonest bullshit, is this dictionary bullshit or is this some kind of non-dictionary bullshit that I'm not aware of? This is the problem. Unless you'll adopt some kind of commonality of definition for things, then it's impossible for us to write things and for anybody else to understand what the fuck they mean. So it isn't just about the word atheism and taking a dictionary definition by and large, but it applies to every single word that you have written in that statement that you have made. And to criticise people for saying, hang on, can we try and have some commonality of definition here so that we can understand one another and not have our definitions that encompass such a wide gamut of things as to render the term useless. I'm sorry, that isn't dishonest bullshit. It's just fucking common sense. Now on to the meat of the video, I think. Okay, so I'm hoping by now that you've gone and had a look at Prof Myers' blog and read what he's wrote in his original blog article and then picked out his comments. It's all the red ones, dead easy to pick out. If you haven't, there's one comment in particular that drew my eye, that seemed so absurd. It's probably the second most absurd thing I've ever come across on the internet. There was a Muslim guy once who his argument for the existence of God was, if I hold a ball in the air and let go of it, it just drops to the floor. Therefore, the earth should just drop to the floor. So God must be holding the earth in place. That was the most absurd thing. This is the second most absurd thing. Let me read out what it said. This is his comment number 152, the last paragraph. Those are all legitimate atheist causes. I'm not saying that you have to become a philosopher to be an atheist. I'm saying it should make a difference in how you live and what you do. If it doesn't, why bother being an atheist? If it doesn't, why bother being an atheist? Bear in mind, this isn't a tweet that he's made here. He hasn't got a 140 character limit. What could that possibly mean? Why bother being an atheist? I made a tweet giving the example, the simile of goblins. You know, if not believing in goblins isn't going to affect how you live your life, why bother not believing in goblins? That's how absurd Prof Myers' comment seemed to me. But then there was a little bit of a link from somebody else to another blog entry that he'd done. What kind of atheist are you? That he did last year, that gave me a few clues as to what was going on here. And that really Prof Myers' problem here, when he says why bother being an atheist, what he means is why bother being an atheist activist, why bother being in an atheist movement, because Prof Myers cannot see any further than in his own American nose. He can't see any further, he can't see any difference between being in an atheist movement, being the political side, the politicization of atheism, and actually simply being an atheist. Let me give you some examples from this earlier post that I'd come across, which is what got me thinking along these lines. He lists on this earlier post, what kind of atheist are you? Different kinds of atheism: scientific atheist, philosophical atheist, political atheist, and then humanists. And in each category he gives strengths and weaknesses. I think the strengths and weaknesses of the humanists gives you some idea. This is what he says for the strengths. This is the heart of an atheist movement that will endure and grow. Ignore it and we can expect atheism to fade away. When I say about not seeing past the end of his American nose, bear in mind that in Europe, by and large, there haven't been any atheist movements. This is an entirely new American concept, the idea that every kind of religious group or group that relates to religion has to have a political movement alongside it to bolster it. The British Social Attitude Survey says that about 50% of the British people, of the people of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, are atheists. They don't believe in a god or gods. And that's all happened without an atheist movement. So ignore it and you expect atheism to fade away. Really shows his prejudices there, that most of the countries that are the most irreligious in the world haven't had these atheist movements powering their growth and expansion. But that isn't the real point. The point is the first line. This is the heart of an atheist movement that will endure and grow. Notice how seemingly he's unaware of switching between what he's doing, which was describing different categories of atheists, of different shades and tones of people's atheism, to talking about an atheist movement and being a member of an atheist movement. They are not the same thing, and this is part of the problem that P.Z. Myers doesn't seem to be aware of. I'll show you a little bit more to that, but first let me say that I'm sure that P.Z. Myers understands there's a difference between being an atheist and a member of an atheist movement, because he would point to somebody such as myself, probably slightly denigratingly call me an apathetic atheist because I'm an atheist, but I'm not a member of an atheist movement. So he would accept that there are atheists who are not members of atheist movements. But what Myers doesn't seem to consider is the opposite, that there may be people who are members of atheist movements who aren't really atheists, that they're just there for political convenience because the socio-political environment of that movement happens to suit their socio-political goals. But the question of God, well, that's a slightly different thing. Let me read you the next thing that he wrote in that piece. Remember, this is a piece, What Kind of Atheist Are You? Dealing with these different kinds of atheism, looking at the weakness of what he called humanist atheists. Pragmatically fickle. Weaknesses. Pragmatically fickle. If the atheist movement does not address human concerns, they'll leave and follow institutions that do. No problem so far because we're talking about movements. But then get this. Why be an atheist if an inclusive, progressive church were to do a better job? In what world are you an atheist who, if just because your fellow atheists don't agree with you on some socio-political things, you think, well, in that case, I'm just going to start praying to God and joining a church? Whatever we talk about with the definitions of atheist and theist, and we can have some quite complex and involved discussions on quite where the boundaries lie, I think it's quite clear that if you join a church and you pray to God, then that isn't really what we consider as an atheist, and that an atheist does actually, even with Myers' wider definitions of atheism, you at least have to encapsulate somewhere within your atheism a lack of a belief in God or gods. But I think this highlights the problem, which we can now set back into the original statement number 152, which was so problematic, that looked so absolutely fucking absurd. And so I offer the argument to you that Myers' real problem is that he cannot differentiate, perhaps because of his cultural upbringing in such a religious environment as you have in the United States. He can't envisage an environment where atheist movements are separate from atheism in the way that you can if you live in Western Europe. So let's go back to his original comment. And what did he wrote? What he wrote was, I'm not saying that you have to become a philosopher to be an atheist. I'm saying it should make a difference in how you live and what you do. If it doesn't, why bother being an atheist? Sounds absurd, but what about if we change the last line, given that Myers doesn't seem to understand the distinction between the two, to this? If it doesn't, why bother being in an atheist movement? That line kind of makes sense now, doesn't it? And I think that highlights kind of the error in thinking that P.Z. Myers is having here. As he's thinking about atheism, he isn't differentiating whilst switching between thinking about atheists and what atheism is and what atheist movements actually consist of, specifically the atheist movements that he is involved in. Anyway, I'd be interested to know if anybody agrees with that, or if anybody disagrees with that, or if anybody just thinks P.Z. Myers is a total cunt. Thank you for watching this video, and bye for now.